My stepkids warned me. We're not your family, so stay out of our lives. They didn't say it like a shout. It landed like a label, printed neat and stuck on my chest while I was still holding the Allen key I'd used to tighten the wobbly dining chair. "You're just a guest, David," Ethan said, thumbs still flicking, eyes on his phone, like the words were a notification he could swipe away. Cole smirked over the fridge door, the light spilling on a shelf I'd adjusted last summer with little nylon bumpers so it wouldn't squeal at 2 a.m. Laura was there, smoothing it over with a soft little laugh that meant don't make a thing of it. She never made a thing of anything, as long as the lights stayed on and the Wi-Fi didn't hiccup. "My name is David, 52. I've lived in Phoenix long enough that summer feels like a dare and the horizon looks like a mirage of better plans. I moved into Laura's place 11 years ago with a toolbox, a decent credit score, and the kind of calm you get from paying your own bills for so long. The due dates feel like holidays you don't celebrate anymore. Somewhere along the way, I became the quiet current that kept her house humming. SRP on autopay, Southwest Gas on my card, City of Phoenix water through my online portal, never late. I switched her from an overpriced family plan to a cheaper one, got the boys' iPhones with decent cases, replaced the router when the Cox line kept dropping in the den. I learned the way this house rattled in dust storms and how the sliding door liked to pop off its track when the heat swelled the frame. I kept it all moving. That was the job, or at least the part I could prove. They were teenagers then, Ethan with that high-shouldered confident Scottsdale kids wear like a Letterman jacket, Cole quieter, funnier, but only when the jokes bent away from me. Their dad, Mark, lived in texts and Christmas photos, a man whose name always arrived with a shrug and a story about why he couldn't make it this time. I filled the empty lanes without asking for credit. That's what men do, or at least the ones I understand. You see something sag and you haul it upright, even if no one watches you strain. The money parts got easier to list than the feelings. Rent when Laura's hours dipped. Utilities, always. A new compressor for the AC the summer, the whole valley felt like a convection oven. Used Hondas for both boys, Craigslist finds with good bones that I combed through on my back in the driveway, dust filling my ears while the neighbor's dog barked and the sun cooked the concrete. Oil changes every 5,000. Tires when cords showed. Insurance tacked onto my policy because their rates were brutal. And, well, we're a family, Laura would say, pressing the word like a stamp meant to legitimize the envelope. I set reminders for emissions. I kept a laminated card in each glove box with the roadside assistance pin, the insurer, the deductible, and my number. Cole once took it out and used it as a coaster. College came like a bill with teeth. I learned bursar portals and FAFSA deadlines, wired deposits while Laura sent heart emojis into the family group chat. I drove Ethan to a campus tour in Tucson in a Honda I'd kept alive with a new alternator and 2 prayers. He spent the ride talking to his friends on speaker while I watched the fuel gauge and the heat needle like a pilot landing with one engine. We took a hollow Thanksgiving photo that year, me at the edge of the frame holding the turkey like a waiter, the boys in front, Laura dead center. Someone posted it with a caption about gratitude. Someone else tagged it. Family. When I saw it later, my name wasn't in the comments, just a string of congratulations to them. A week after that, Ethan asked for a reference letter for an internship, said he needed it, from someone who really knows my work. I wrote it. He submitted Laura's name as the author. When I found out, I said nothing. For so long, I could hear my own heartbeat in the refrigerator motor. Little humiliations became the air in the house. A joke about our real dad, right as I fixed the dishwasher and fished glass out of the filter with a bent paperclip. Laura's laugh, light as tissue. A Christmas where the boys hugged each other and their mother, while my gifts sat in piles of torn paper with no eyes ever meeting mine. A dentist reminder I set and rescheduled twice so Ethan wouldn't lose his slot. He skipped it anyway, and I ate the fee like a parking ticket. The fell-through senior trip that I secretly saved with hotel points and a rental car code I wasn't supposed to use because we're family, until we weren't. On paper, I was the man who signed for things. I signed for the new water heater when the old one walked itself to the door with rust. I signed for the Costco membership upgrade so they could throw more frozen pizza at problems. I signed the lease renewal and kept the rent steady by fixing things myself. Sagging cabinet doors, a toilet fill valve that screamed in the night, the garage door sensor that blinked red like a warning about everything we refused to say aloud. The landlord liked me because I made his life easy. Everyone liked me because I made their lives easy. It's a strange intimacy, maintenance. You learn people by what breaks around them. Laura fractured under late fees. Ethan cracked when his phone battery drooped below 15%. Cole splintered any time you asked him to plan past Friday. I learned the seams and built supports they never saw. A spreadsheet with every policy number. A photo of both boys' VINs in my camera roll. Notes on when to reseal the driveway. A reminder to replace the smoke alarm batteries every New Year's Day because there's a kind of mercy in predictable beeping. Phoenix has 2 seasons, blast furnace and waiting room. I measured time by heat. Spring, where the AC runs 5 extra minutes per hour. August, where your steering wheel is a skillet. That summer, the house felt hotter than the forecast. We were supposed to take a family photo, matching desert neutrals, Laura's idea. I came downstairs in a pressed shirt that made me look like a man who belonged in the center of a picture. Cole glanced up and said, "Hey, could you stand on the end? This is really for us." My mouth didn't move. Laura adjusted a throw pillow and said, "Just this once, okay?" I stood on the end. The camera blinked. The printer hummed later in the office while I set up the frame and made sure the backing sat flush against the glass. A week later, I found the framed version hanging above the mantel. Big, the kind of thing you hang to declare an origin story. Someone had captioned it in a nice serif font. The Martins, Laura, Ethan, Cole. Underneath, in a smaller type like a footnote, guest, David. I stood under it the first time, a coffee mug warming my hands, and felt something in me go heavy and old, like a beam that had been bearing weight too long. I could have taken it down. I could have scratched out the word with a key. Instead, I rewired a GFCI outlet in the guest bath that afternoon and made sure the boys' chargers wouldn't trip the breaker. "Don't take it to heart," Laura said later, rubbing my shoulder, eyes already on the TV. "You know how boys are." She'd said some version of that sentence about 1,000 different cuts. You know how boys are. You know how money is. You know how life is. What I knew was Cox would bill on the 21st and SRP on the 3rd, and the Hondas needed inspections before registration, and Ethan's campus dental plan only covered cleanings and not the crown he kept putting off. What I knew was that everything they didn't notice would still be done by me. The night the line finally formed, the grill had just flared. We'd loaded the backyard with neighbors and the kind of friends who know you well enough to eat your food, but not well enough to notice you're tired. I'd spent the afternoon trimming the bougainvillea so no one would snag their shirts, rolling the cooler onto a towel so it wouldn't scar the pavers I'd laid myself, checking the propane twice because that's the kind of quiet insurance I carry. The string lights cast a nice glow on everyone else's faces. Ethan and Cole stood near the cooler, their voices loud enough to carry. Somebody made a joke about rules, about curfews, about who gets to say what in whose house. I heard my name come out of Ethan's mouth like a brand he was holding up for inspection. "He's not family," he said, and the words didn't echo because the lawn swallowed them. "So he can stay out of our lives." Cole added the period. "Yeah, stay out." 3 seconds of quiet followed. Not a hush. More like when an old truck misses a gear and everybody pretends it was intentional. Laura did the smoothing thing then, that warm laugh that says, "We're all fine." She touched my wrist like a hostess thanks a caterer, not a partner. I flipped the burgers, counted 8, knew we had 9 mouths. I didn't correct the math. Someone asked about the recipe. I said, salt and a clock, which is true about most things that come out right. That was the moment, though. Not the worst thing they'd said to me. Not even clever. Just true in their mouths. Not family. "Stay out." I slid a plate toward a kid who didn't know my name, wiped my hands on a towel I'd bleached white all summer, and looked around at a backyard I'd sodded, a fence I'd stained, a shade sail I'd measured with a tape while standing barefoot on hot flagstone. A little corner of Phoenix I'd paid for and repaired until it resembled a life. The grill hissed. Someone's Spotify playlist skipped. A warm wind lifted the napkins and let them fall again. Inside, the thermostat clicked like a metronome for the dance we'd been doing for years. I'm not a man who argues with children. I don't do scenes. I don't threaten. I inventory, and right then, I started counting backwards from 0. The party ran down around 10. Paper plates in the bin, red cups nested like collapsed goals. Neighbors waved from the gate I'd rehung with longer screws because the old holes had gone soft. Laura thanked people for coming like she'd hosted it alone. The boys disappeared with leftovers, laughing about a trip, about gas money, about summer as if it were a faucet that couldn't turn off. I put the grill to bed, scraped grates, shut the valve, cracked the lid to let the heat ghost out. Phoenix nights don't cool so much as loosen their grip. I stood in the yard I'd measured and ordered piece by piece, pavers, sod, crushed granite, and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere in there, my name was a label on a plastic tub, useful until it wasn't needed, then shoved back on a shelf. Inside, Laura was rinsing the good serving spoons we never used until someone else came over to see we owned them. She was soft-spoken in the way that wins arguments by refusing to enter them. "They're kids," she said into the clatter, preempting a fight I hadn't offered. "They don't mean it." "They meant it," I said, folding the towel. I kept my voice the same temperature I use when I back a trailer. Steady, slow, interested only in angles. But that's not the point. She turned, eyes a little wet around the edges, already recruiting the future to pardon the present. "Don't let pride ruin a good night, David." I nodded like a man who agreed. Then I went to the office. I keep a drawer labeled Accounts. It isn't anything special, just a shallow, neat tray with tabs for each orbiting moon of our little planet. Phone, streaming, gym, insurance, fuel, utilities. When you've been the backbone long enough, you learn to make the vertebrae easy to count. The first call was to the phone carrier. Family plan. 4 lines, 2 installments still being paid down because Ethan needed the Pro Max like oxygen, Cole needed the color that isn't lame, and Laura's upgrade had happened during a promotion I found by reading the fine print twice. I pulled the account up, gave the security word only I knew. "I'd like to separate my number," I said, and suspend 3 lines. The rep started the script about shared savings. I let her finish. No, I said, polite as a closed door. Bring my number to a single-line plan. Lock it with a pin. Remove payment for the other lines. She asked if I wanted to notify the users. They'll figure it out, I said. People always do when the lights go out. Next was streaming. Netflix, Disney+, Hulu on a trial that renewed every time a major show released because Laura liked to follow along at work. I logged in, thumbed to Manage, and watched the avatars line up. Ethan's set to some anime hero, Cole's a grinning soccer ball, Laura's the generic smile. Mine was a blank square that said, in its way, exactly what I felt. I canceled each one, took screenshots of confirmation emails, slid them into a folder named, uncreatively, Changes. The gym was a family membership under my card, the kind where nobody ever checked in except me. I'd added them because Cole swore he'd lift if he didn't have to do it alone. The system showed 3 visits from him, January 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The resolution died like a fern in a dark room. I walked in, handed over the key tags like you surrender plates at the DMV after selling a car. The kid at the desk said he could freeze instead, save me a reactivation fee. I asked him to cancel. He typed as if it personally offended him. I thanked him like he'd helped me move a couch. Fuel cards weren't cards so much as attachments on my account. Little digital mouths sipping at Chevron and Shell and QT. I toggled them off in the app, then called to make sure toggled actually meant off. The man on the phone said he could set purchase limits. 0 is the limit, I said. He laughed before he realized I wasn't joining him. It's hard to explain to people who sell you tricks that the trick is not needing them. Insurance was bigger. Auto and renters bundled for the discount only adults care about. The policy listed 4 drivers. Me, Laura, the boys. Vehicles, 2 Hondas. I'd bought used and kept breathing with timing belts and prayers. Laura's crossover that thought too highly of itself. My Tacoma that thought exactly as much of itself as it should. I called our agent, Jan, who sent holiday cards with a calendar and a magnet because she knows our tribe. Jan, I said, I need to remove 3 drivers and 2 vehicles. She went quiet in the way professionals do when they hear the shape of a divorce, but aren't allowed to call it that. You'll lose your multi-line discount, she said. I won't, I answered. They will. Is everything okay? She asked. Everything is accurate, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said all year. Autopays were next. SRP, Southwest Gas, City of Phoenix Water, Cox, the HOA dues on a thing that didn't improve our lives, but did keep the community pool from looking like a swamp. I opened each account and removed my card. For utilities tied to my email, I changed the login to a fresh address, set the password to something no one would guess, then wrote a short note and saved it in the drawer for when Laura asked. It said simply, "Starting next cycle, please pay your portion directly." Disrespect isn't a season pass to my resources. I didn't write more. The point of boundaries is their brevity. In the kitchen, the dishwasher hummed. The machine I'd coaxed through one more year with a new pump and a YouTube video spit water over plates the boys had stacked like Jenga. Laura leaned on the island with her wine and her soft eyes and said, "You're not really going to punish them, are you?" "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm resigning from a job I was never hired to do." She didn't like that. "You love them," she said, as if the word itself should be enough to erase invoices. "You've always said family helps." "I have," I said, folding the change confirmations into the file. "And I'm helping in the only way that matters now, by making the cost of their choices visible." She tried a different route, the one that had worked for years, the forecast of future gratitude. One day, they'll see. Then one day, I said, and left the sentence like that. Open. Accurate. That night, in bed, she made herself small and furious. Her back became a wall that radiated heat. I stared at the ceiling fan I'd balanced with a penny so it wouldn't wobble, watched the blades slice the room into quiet, and thought about all the little invisible balances I'd kept. Budgets, emotions, schedules, expectations. The house slept on credit. In the morning, my phone lit up like a server room alarm. Ethan. Bro, WTF, my data cut out? Cole. Disney Plus says we don't have access. Fix? Laura. Can you just turn it all back on while we talk? Then a family group chat I'd named House Stuff. Years ago, filled with question marks and gifs of flames like any of this was funny. I didn't reply immediately. I made coffee, the way I always do. Grinder timed, scaled water, kettle to 205, pour in slow circles. Rituals keep you from reacting like a fool. I sat at the table I'd assembled, in the chair I'd re-glued, and drank until the cup went cool. When I did respond, I used fewer words than they'd sent characters. To the boys, you said I'm not family. My support reflected family. It ends now. To Laura, separately, we can talk about a fair split of current household costs, in writing. In the group chat, nothing. I left the last posted thing, Laura's picture of a burger from the night before, sitting there like a relic from a vanished civilization. They fired back what you would expect. Ethan accused me of being petty, then asked if I could at least spot him gas until Friday. Cole said I was overreacting, punctuated with a crying, laughing face that made me consider the anthropology of emoji on grown men. Laura sent, "Let's not do this over text," which is what people say when text puts their vagueness in high resolution. I went to the garage. My Tacoma smelled like sun and dust and honest work. I gathered the spare keys I shouldn't have had to hide. Honda number 1 with a cracked fob, Honda number 2 with a trade-in value that existed only in imagination, Laura's crossover I'd keep running until she could refinance it into her own name. I set the boys' keys on the kitchen counter with their laminated insurance cards. I took pictures, time-stamped them. Then I opened my banking app and removed every saved external account that ever received a drip from me. I closed the credit card the boys had for emergencies that turned into Gatorade and energy drinks and a gas station car wash that scratched the paint I'd buffed with my own hands. At noon, Laura tried to hug me into agreement. She pressed her cheek to my chest like she was listening for forgiveness. "You know I appreciate everything," she said. They're boys." "And I'm just a guest," I said. Not unkind, just accurate. "Guests don't carry the mortgage." "We don't have a mortgage," she shot back. Semantic rescue. We had a lease. We had my credit. We had the same gravity by another name. I didn't argue. I printed a simple page. Beginning this month, I will pay my half of rent and utilities directly to landlord and providers. I will no longer fund phone lines, streaming services, gym memberships, fuel, auto insurance, tuition payments, or incidental expenses for Ethan or Cole. I taped it inside the accounts drawer. I left the drawer open. Boundary is a small word for a large dam. By evening, the house had learned a new sound. Silence with purpose. Ethan paced and made calls to friends, to the carrier, to nobody who could override a pin. Cole slammed cabinets. Laura sat on the couch, scrolling for a deal that would feel like a fix. The sun went down, and the thermostat climbed. I listened to the compressor kick on, a machine I'd bought when the last one died on a 114-degree day that ended with me on the roof at dusk, sweat in my eyes, the city glowing like a field of little fires. Before bed, I unplugged the router, waited, and plugged it back in. Old habit. This time, the network name changed. It used to be Martin's Home because that made Laura smile. Now it was something simple and not at all sentimental. PHX 5G27. Password printed fresh, folded into my wallet. I didn't tell anyone. If they asked, I'd share it. If they didn't, they could live with their assumptions one night the way I'd lived with theirs for a decade. I slept like a man who had finally put a heavy box down. The first real sound was a dial tone from the 1990s. Flat. Insulting. Ethan stood in the kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear like it owed him rent. He jabbed the screen, paced a rut between the fridge I'd leveled and the pantry shelf I'd reinforced. "It just cuts," he said to the air, as if explaining it might fetch a signal. Cole held the TV remote like a detonator and kept landing on the login wall. This account is no longer active. The house had never been so full of electronics and so empty of power. A dentist text came in at 8:14. Reminder, Ethan, 10 a.m. I'd set that reminder months ago, synced it to his calendar, nudged it twice last week when he ghosted the pre-visit forms. He shrugged it off, drove to Tempe to pick up a friend, decided the cleaning could wait. At 10:27, the office called to confirm the no-show fee. Laura answered and said, "We'll take care of it," the royal we she uses when she means me. She found me in the garage checking the Tacoma's coolant like I was cheating on her with competence. "Can you just—" she began. "No," I said, civil as a bank teller. "You all told me to stay out of your lives." By noon, Ethan's campus portal flashed something new and instructional. Bursar hold. Balance due. $1,642.75. The amount wasn't catastrophic. The message was, holds don't care about your feelings. They don't let you register. They don't let you print transcripts, join wait lists, or pretend tomorrow is guaranteed. He stared at the laptop like it had betrayed him personally. "I thought the plan covered this," he said. "The plan was me," I said. "You ended it with a backyard speech." Cole found his own cliff at the MVD. The inspection he'd promised to handle kept slipping under weekends and jokes until the month rolled over and the registration expired. He cruised through a speed van like a celebrity and came home waving a ticket he called "not real" because it arrived in the mail. The online portal wanted proof of inspection before letting him pay the fine. The inspection station wanted cash. The Honda wanted brakes. Reality wanted everything at once, like it always does, and Cole looked at me the way boys look at jacks when their tires finally go flat, accusing the tool for existing. Laura deployed apologies like bandages that never stuck. "They didn't mean it," she said, walking circles with her phone, calling carriers, calling the dentist, calling the bursar, learning that systems speak fluent policy and no other language. When transfers pinned her between hold music and a voice that kept saying, "I understand your frustration," I watched the woman I'd protected from paperwork meet the country she lived in. She had always believed feelings were a currency. She discovered they don't clear. Mark texted, like a guest tapping a window during a storm. "Hang in there." No money. No offer to add the boys to his insurance, which had always been theoretical anyway. No, "I'll cover the ticket," or "Tell Ethan I'll talk to the bursar." Just 3 words that weighed as much as steam. Laura showed me the message like evidence, as if the faint glow of fatherhood absolved the dark. The senior trip died twice. First, when Cole realized the group rate expired because his card kept getting declined. 2 gas station overdrafts and a fast food swipe that posted late had turned his checking account into a shallow puddle that reflected the sky but couldn't water anything. Second, when the advisor emailed to say they needed proof of travel insurance and the link spat an error because the auto policy it expected wasn't there anymore. "This is all so harsh," Laura said, as if harshness were a choice I'd made and not a feature of gravity. They tried a family meeting. Laura set out bottled water like peace offerings. She printed a budget template from a blog that promised harmony in 6 columns. Ethan came with his cap on backward and his palm out. Cole arrived late, then left to take a call, returned with a grin that meant his friend found a workaround. Someone else's login, someone else's gas card, a borrowed inspection sticker if he drove to Mesa. They brought ingenuity to theft. They brought nothing to the bill. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, words shaped by Laura's coaching. "We were out of line." "Out of orbit," I said. "Different problem." Laura touched my forearm. "Could you help them through this month?" she asked. "And then we'll start fresh." "I already started fresh," I said, and slid a printout across the table. It was the policy page I'd taped inside the drawer, the one that said, in plain font, where my money would go and where it would not. Ethan read it like a traffic ticket. Cole didn't read at all. Laura's eyes tracked the lines, slow, as if she were walking a ridge with no guardrail. "Don't you feel responsible?" she asked, trying guilt now that love had bounced. "I feel responsible for what I agreed to," I said. I didn't agree to fund contempt. For 3 days, the house functioned on friction. The router name I wouldn't give up became a scavenger hunt. Ethan burned his data cap and learned what throttling feels like, the internet sighing and going limp when you need it to run. Cole fixed his inspection only after a cop pulled him over and explained law like a father would have. He called me from the side of the road because the laminated card told him who to call. "It's the same number," he said, surprised I hadn't changed. "I'm the same man," I said, not bothering to explain the difference between help and service. On day 4, I packed 2 boxes, tools I owned, papers that had my name written in ink. The house watched, suddenly shy. Laura asked where I was going as if distance might argue me down. "Tempe," I said. "A small apartment near University and Rural, 2nd floor, faces west, blinds that rattle, carpet I will learn to ignore." It had a kitchen the size of a promise and a lease that said exactly who lived there. I signed with my own hand. I transferred my accounts to a new bank because the old one carried too many ghosts. I ported my number to a fresh carrier because habits were built into the old digits. I carried 2 boxes down a staircase I'd repaired after a party guest missed a step and blamed the lighting. I left a note on the counter. Rent. $1,250 due. On the first to landlord directly. SRP, Cox, water, gas, see attached login changes. Auto insurance, call Jan. Phones, streaming, gym, fuel, tuition. You're adults, act like it. Underneath, 1 sentence to fit the hole in the wall. Disrespect isn't a season pass to my resources. Laura cried the way people cry when the consequences are finally the right size. She asked me to stay until the boys settle. The boys asked nothing but, by text, asked everything. Could you maybe, real quick, do you have? I answered with the smallest word English makes. No. The Tempe place smelled like primer and neighbor cooking. I unpacked slowly. A mattress on the floor looked honest. The first grocery run fit in one hand. Eggs, bread, beans, coffee, salt. I made the Wi-Fi something I wouldn't be ashamed to write on a label. DW pays, his own. The landlord shook my hand like he liked men who arrived with steady eyes and no entourage. I liked the quiet. 3 days later, at Home Depot, I saw them. Summer light, orange aprons, air conditioners stacked in islands like shining answers. Ethan and Cole flanked Laura. The three of them moved like a school trying not to look like a school. Cart with a new faucet. Bathroom, I guessed. The old one had a drip I'd learned to tune out. A pack of LED bulbs because they finally heard the song of savings. A cheap plunger that would break before the first job. I was in plumbing. Aisle 12. Hands on a brass ball valve I didn't need but wanted when we turned corners into each other. Laura inhaled like she'd seen a wolf. Ethan made his chin into an argument. Cole studied the boxes like they contained safer choices. I nodded once, not hostile, not helpful. Just acknowledgement that we had all placed our pieces where we placed them. Then I kept walking. David, Laura said, the word full of history it couldn't carry anymore. I didn't stop. You don't negotiate with gravity. You learn its terms, and you live on them. In the parking lot, the sun did what the sun does in Phoenix, burned everything to its exact color. I loaded a small thing into a small truck and drove to a small apartment where every bill had my name, and only my name. The world felt lighter because it had finally stopped borrowing my back. That night, my phone pinged. A text from Mark, the man whose shadow had access it didn't deserve. Heard you moved out. It's for the best. Hang in there. He sent a thumbs-up emoji like a benediction. I stared at the screen until it went dark, and then I let the dark hold me. 2 days after that, Laura forwarded an email. We can't register Ethan until the hold clears. She added, This is serious. I replied with a link to the bursar's payment page. No commentary. No rescue. It felt mean the way stitches feel mean when the wound wants to stay open. Cole, humbled by the stop, asked for the inspection place I trusted. I sent him the address. He wrote, Thanks. No emoji. No sarcasm. It read like the first true word he'd ever sent me. I didn't reward it. I let it be. Apologies arrived like rain on hot pavement. Loud, brief, more steam than water. Laura wrote, They're sorry. I'm sorry. Ethan wrote, I should not have said what I said. Cole wrote nothing, and then, an hour later, My bad. I believed them exactly as far as the ink went. People are sincere inside discomfort. The test is who they are when comfort returns. I started measuring days by what I didn't hear. No beeps from autopays. No chimes from shared calendars. No calls that began with, Can you just? Silence is not absence when it's earned. It's space. It's a shelf I installed in my own chest, level and strong, waiting for the weight I choose. The first week in Tempe, I learned the sound of my new place, the AC coughing itself awake, the upstairs neighbor's tread at 6:12, the pool pump far off like a calm heartbeat. On day 8, a different sound arrived. Panic, echoing through my phone in fragments. Laura, the water shows a late fee. Where do I? Me, the portal. Laura, what portal? Me, the one I emailed. Twice. 2 hours later, she called again, whispering like the bill could hear her. It wants a deposit. It never asked you for. It did, I said. I paid it 11 years ago. Ethan sent a screenshot of the bursar page, as if I might be swayed by fonts. The balance had grown to a satisfyingly adult number, swollen with an enrollment continuation charge colleges invented to turn drift into revenue. They're being crazy, he wrote. No, I typed. They're being a college. He tried a memory. Didn't you say education is an investment? I did, I answered. Invest. Cole learned what lapsed insurance tastes like when a tow truck driver asked for a card and then laughed at the laminated roadside number I'd made. This plan ended last month, man, the driver said. Cole texted me from the shoulder of McDowell. Is there like a grace period? I told him there was, once, and he spoke during it. Laura, to her credit, started making lists. She walked through rooms like a meteorologist, naming the storms. SRP by the 3rd, Cox by the 21st, water whenever, gas a thief that always sneaks through the dog door. She sounded out account numbers into customer service headsets and learned the hold music of 3 utilities and 1 HOA. She asked me to come over and just walk me through the whole stack, a phrase you use with printers and debt. I'll send instructions, I said. She called it cold. I called it adult. My apartment settled around me like clothes that fit on the second wear. I hung a pegboard for the tools I kept. The rest I'd left behind by design. A toolbox is gravity and metal. Better to travel light. The landlord waved when he saw me carry in a plunger and a single plant. You one of the quiet ones? He asked. That's the plan, I said. On a Wednesday, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, new phone. It's Ethan. My old number had finally been detached from their emergencies. Can I borrow $200 till payday? I got on at the car wash. Tips are good. The sentence impressed me with its accidental honesty. Work, small, wet. I sent back a different number, the Bursar office. Then I put my phone face down and stirred beans on a stove no one else would dirty. Cole pivoted to hustles. DoorDash. Selling a pair of used sneakers for more than he paid. If you didn't count the 9 months of free shipping I'd covered. He took a friend's cousin's job painting trim and sent me a picture of his own Honda, door edge smeared eggshell white where he'd brushed against it with loaded tape. How do I get this off? He asked. Mineral spirits, I replied. Light hand. 10 minutes later. That worked. A small thing, but the first time in months my advice had a place to sit. Mark stayed consistent, inconsistent. He sent Laura a long text that was 90% biography and 10% apology. It included the phrase, just trying to keep my head above water, as if drowning were an achievement. He offered to call Ethan man to man, and then failed to pick a time. When Laura nudged him about auto insurance, he answered with an essay about premium hikes. He never said the word pay. The systems kept grinding. A notice from the dentist about sending Ethan to collections. Laura drove over to explain and came back red-eyed because the office manager had the gall to be professional. She just kept pointing to the line where I initialed, Laura said, as if signatures were rude. I didn't smile. I did feel the steady click of reality finding its stops. I saw them twice more in the wild. Once at Fry's, Laura pushing a cart, comparing store brand to brand name like she'd discovered a new country, the boys trailing, hollowed out by the minor cruelty of planning. We locked eyes over the cereal. She lifted a box of the kind I used to buy and mouthed, "You were right." I shook my head. That wasn't the sentence. This wasn't about correctness. It was about price and respect, finally sharing a table. The second time was at the MVD. Tempe's smelled like a printer married to a shoe store. I was there to renew my license early because I had the time and the decency not to stand in lines during lunch. Ethan sat in the appointments section, learning that making one required more than wishing. Cole stood by the photo backdrop with a piece of paper in his hand and a look that said he'd prepped for the test of manhood by downloading an app. Laura rifled a folder that had once lived in my drawer, pages bent in places where she'd never bent them before. I nodded in their direction. Cole nodded back before remembering the script. Ethan didn't look up. Laura did the small wave you do at funerals. At my apartment, I started keeping my own list. It wasn't of their failures. I already knew those. It was a ledger of what my life cost when I wasn't underwriting a circus. Rent, on time. Utilities, Minimal. Quiet. Exact. Groceries. Honest. Gas. Water in the desert. Measured and grateful. Streaming? None. I read. Gym. The pull-up bar in my doorway. A kettlebell by the couch. Phone? One line. $40. Insurance. Just me. The premium felt like a thank you note from a universe that prefers clean books. On a Sunday, Laura called from the parking lot of a car wash. Ethan's job. I could hear sprayers, steady like rain we never get. He's trying, she said. I bet, I answered, and meant it. Trying is a beginning, not a finish. He says he can't get into classes unless the hold. Then he'll clear the hold, I said. Adults find a way, or they change a plan. You used to help him find ways. I used to help him because he treated me like blood. He told me I wasn't. I believed him. She went quiet long enough to make me think we'd ended the call. I didn't mean it like that, she finally said, playing a card 2 decks late. When I said you know how boys are. I know how boys are when no one requires they become men, I said, and kept my voice gentle because I wasn't angry. I was finished. The power blinked at their house on the 3rd. I know the date because it always was. The autopay didn't pull. The grace window closed. SRP did what SRP does. Laura called then, breathless. We're dark. I told her where the breaker panel was, even though that wasn't the problem. She tried it anyway. The lights did not sympathize. She said she'd never made an account in her name, that the system didn't recognize her. It recognizes me, I said. It always has. She cried then, not the performative kind, but the kind you do in the presence of forms. I emailed the link to create an account. She followed it like a pilgrim. Later she wrote, "Back on. Cost me the deposit and a fee." I resisted the urge to write, "Welcome." Ethan cleared his hold with 3 paychecks and a borrowed $100 from a friend who demanded Venmo back with a shark's patience. He sent me a picture of the registration successful screen, like a toddler showing a drawing on the fridge. I didn't respond for an hour on purpose. When I did, I typed one word, good. He replied with something that surprised me. I'm changing my major. He didn't ask me what I thought. He told me. It read, for the first time, like a man presenting a plan. Cole finally passed inspection, paid his camera ticket, and posted a story about adulting with a shot of the receipt like it was a summit flag. The comment below, from a girl, said, "Proud of you." The heart he gave it was reckless and sincere. He texted me the next day. "What's your trick for not overdrafting?" I told him there was no trick. Spend less than you earn. He typed back, "That's boring." I sent back, "So is a working life. It also works." He left it on red. Mark's contribution across all of this was a quick selfie at a baseball game with a caption, "Father-son time." The son in question was from his second marriage. Ethan saw it. He didn't complain to me because that bridge was still smoking, but I could feel the cold travel through the lines of the city like a front. The next day, he picked up a second shift at the wash. Laura tried one more treaty. She asked me to meet for coffee at a place in Arcadia with chairs built for people who want to be seen sitting in them. I wore clean work jeans and a shirt with my name nowhere on it. She called me sweetheart. Twice out of habit, and then stopped when she heard the word hit a wall. "I want you to come home," she said, and the word home did the trick it always does. It pointed, and I followed where it pointed. But this time, it pointed to my apartment, to the pegboard, to the pull-up bar, to the quiet. "I could come by," I said, "if there's a contract." Her face pinched. "A contract? Between us? Written? What I pay for? What I don't? A rule about respect? Consequences for breaking it? Signatures? We're not a business. We've been a bad one, I said. I'm offering a clean ledger. She said she needed to think. I told her to take all the time the calendar allowed. I wasn't negotiating with a deadline. I left money on the table for my coffee and hers. She protested. I said, "A goodbye tip." In the lot, under a sky that looked like it had been scrubbed by heat, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the weight of only my life in my pocket. I got in the Tacoma and drove nowhere special. Radio off, windows up, air on low. The smallness of the ride felt like grace. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Cole. "We made dinner. Mom asked if you want to come eat." I stared at it. I thought about the table I'd assembled, the chair I'd glued, the peeling label on the Allen key that started this whole story. I wrote back, "Thank you. Not tonight." He added, "No pressure." I believed him. I slept with the blinds open, streetlight on the wall, the city pulsing, not as a burden I had to wire into a home, but as a backdrop. Somewhere, Ethan was rinsing soap from a sedan. Somewhere, Cole was learning how long 30 days actually is. Somewhere, Laura was balancing a checkbook she didn't know existed a month ago. Somewhere, Mark was posting. Systems don't care. They don't hate you. They don't love you. They reflect the shape of your choices with receipts. I had become a man with only mine.